When I see promotion of innovation technologies for low carbon, I see two questions, main questions that should be promoted. First of all, promotion of innovation, who should promote this innovation? And the second question is low carbon, how low should it be? So these two questions are puzzling because we're always talking about what should be done, and we're not talking about who should do it or what the role of the players in this field, and for how, what is the right level that we should get to. And when we talk about promotion of innovation of low carbon, I see external effects. And when you talk about external effects, these effects are not only on the national level, it's even in the international level. And because of that, we have international talks about what is the right level. But after we have these main targets of the international level, we go down to the national level. And here I see the role of the government, specifically Israel government or French government, and I ask what is the role, or what should we decide about the private sector against the public sector, and each one what is the real role in this promotion. And I think that I want to talk specifically about the government role, or mainly about the government role, because I see the private sector as a sector that its aim is to earn money. And this is their target, and this is their role. And I see the government as the one that has to promote or to incent the private sector to go to the right place that we want the private sector to be. I don't see the private sector thinking about external effects or thinking about what is the right technology for the national level or for the international level. No, this is the role of the government, and the government should give the incentives and to push the private sector to the right place. So, in the last lectures, there was some I think interesting points, like the thing about the life cycle analysis and the great gap of energy efficiency. When we talk about energy efficiency, we always talk about the consumption of energy, and we don't really talk too much about the production of the cars that you talked about. And when you put the production and you look also at the consumption, you sometimes see that something that is very efficient in the consumption area is not really efficient in the production. And the only format we can talk about is a look at the life cycle analysis, and the only player that should look at the life cycle analysis should be the government. The private sector should look at prices, should get incentives from the prices, and decide what kind of car or what kind of energy he wants to promote, or which technology to promote. The government should push the sectors to the right place. So when you talk about a life cycle analysis, it shows that the role of the government is very important, and without this role, leaving all this field only for the private sector will push the private sector to the place that they earn the most, they can earn the maximum money, and sometimes we won't get to the right place. I think that the role of the government specifically here should be in three, let's say, in three main conditions. First of all, incentives. It should push the private sectors by prices and by public investment. And this is the National Action Plan we talked about that we did a couple of years ago, where we talked about what is the right incentives that the government should give for the private sector in order to push the private sector to the right place. They will find the technologies, they will promote these technologies if they see the right prices and they see the public investments that are in these fields. But there's another very important field that we should, or point that we should add. Certainty. The private sector needs certainty. They need a long-run vision. They should look and know what are going to be the prices and what is going to be the right consumption in the future. And a lot of times, specifically in Israel, the government gives the regulations for the next year or for the next 2 years, and they don't talk about the long-run regulations. They don't talk about how we're going to get in 10 or 15 years. And the private sector that takes about 5 to 10 years to promote some technologies need this certainty for the future in order to build up the right technologies for the future. So we're always talking about the crises, the crises that are now affecting. We're talking about the weather today. We're talking about carbon, low carbon. We should talk about the long run. We should look at the incentives to push the private sector for the long run regulations, long run certainty, and incentives in order for the private sector to get to this technology in the next generation, or at least in the next 10 years, and not try to grasp the technology that is ready in 2 or 3 years, because the private sector does not know how to work in this kind of field. The second point that is very important that I see is how low carbon, or what is the right level of low carbon. This is something that let's say that the international level decided, or even in Israel, the national level, our prime minister or our president talked about 20% cut down in carbon for the year 2020. Why 20%? Why not 15? Why not 40? Or any other number? Where does this 20% reduction comes from? And I can tell specifically for what I know that there's no base for this 20% reduction. It's just a number that is thrown out. Nobody really checked if this is the right number, if this is the right level of carbon. Nobody did really any life cycle analysis or even a cost-benefit analysis in order to get to the right level. I can say that as one that is working and consulting for the government, also used some numbers that are not really the right numbers. I'll just give one example, a very important example. We try to understand what is the right level, what is, let's say, the external effect of carbon. What is the price of 1 ton of carbon? Is it $20? It's $50? Or any other numbers? Now we go to the, let's say, to the market for carbon, and we see that the market of carbon talks about 20 euros per ton of carbon. Is this the right price? Because we say, yeah, look, this is demand, this is supply, and we get to the right number, 20 euros per ton carbon. But this is really not the right number, because this number comes from the decision of the governments in the world that that the carbon should get to a reduction of let's say, of an X level, and by that they demand to get to this level, we reduce the demand for cut downs in carbon, and the supply, the technology, or any other projects in the world is a supply. And when we really look at the numbers, we understand that the right level of carbon was never decided by any tool of analysis. It was just decided upon some decision from the governments, let's say a political decision. Then we get a stock exchange for carbon that is very interesting. It's very, from the economic side, it's really something that it's a great point to see a stock exchange of carbon. But when we look at a stock exchange, we believe that the sector, the private sector, and all the markets are working for this stock exchange, and the price that we get is a real price. But we don't understand that behind this number, there's a demand that comes from regulations. It doesn't come from the decision of the private sector, or from the public sector that this is the right level that we should get to. It comes from the regulations of each country in the world. Each country decides about this level from the international conferences. And at the end, we get the right level of demand that is just regulations. We get a supply of technologies that are, let's say, are the bottleneck technologies. They are the technologies that are now available in order to get to this low level of carbon. And we get a market that everybody looks at this market and says this is the right price of carbon, while the regulations are the ones that decided about this level.